Excellent. Welcome everyone to the Power of Passive Investing meetup. Excited to have you all on this holiday week. We have a guest today, John Laine, who will tell us a very interesting story of his. Before we get into that, I just want to kind of do our traditional housekeeping items. Elena is out this week, so I'm kind of taking the reins as lead host today. She's out on vacation, as I hope many of you are as well. And just the housekeeping items, we as always, it's kind of a monthly meetup, the first Wednesday of the month. We would always love it if you guys invite friends or family or others interested in real estate to come join us on the first Wednesday of the month, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We host them live. For many of you that might be watching this recording afterwards, please join us live if you can. It gives you the ability to ask Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, attendees are muted for the duration of this, but we can unmute you at the end for Q&A. But if you have questions throughout, go ahead and use the chat room and I will direct those questions towards John as he's presenting. The format of tonight's session, like usual, will be this brief intro, and then John will present, and we'll leave 15 minutes at the end for the Q&A. And our legal disclaimer, anything you hear today is not investing or accounting advice. You'll have to consult your professionals there. This is just some real estate folks sharing their own personal experiences. So anything discussed today should not be used to help directly make investment decisions for you or others. But with that, I'd like to just quickly introduce John Laine. He has a very interesting story to share with us this evening. John, I would love for you to give the background. I'll tease it, but I would love to kind of do it righteousness. So John has an interesting story that goes all the way back. He's starting his story at age 16. For like many of us, we don't know quite where our real estate journey begins, right? Because as hopefully as early as we're born, right, we have some exposure to real estate in some way, shape, or form through our families or others. John's first experience, he can recall, his family's home was foreclosed upon at 16. So that was a milestone in life, an unfortunate one that he remembers and can share with us, and how that shaped his real estate experience from there on out. I'll just fast forward to John having a few life events. At 19, managed to purchase his own property. So that's quite early. I know for a lot of us who are still aspiring to purchase properties well into our professional careers. So John managed to do that quite early on. Again, another very important moment in John's life. At 31, he was diagnosed with cancerous brain tumor. So that was a very important moment. I'm sure he'll tell us more about that. And then John's story mostly centers around, we've all heard the stories about 2008 and kind of the tragic moments and the financial difficulties for many. That was a very trying time for John. He'll tell us his story around his real estate journey and how that collided with the 2008 kind of financial crisis. So with no further ado, John, I'll turn it over to you, and I would love for you to add on to that background. I just kind of picked and chose a very few highlights, but would love to kind of hear your background in further detail as well.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much for having me. It is a very weird background. I've had nothing but weird things in my life when it comes to real estate. Real estate's been this constant through line in my life, and been very, very blessed by it, very troubled by it. It's been an interesting process. Here, I'm going to go ahead, unless you have any other questions, I can just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, let's get started. John's going to focus. He has a lot of stories he could share with us, but I think tonight's focus is going to be, the headline here is 3 essential lessons from losing $77 million in real estate. And that's some topics there. We'll learn about 5 laws of leverage from John. Your net worth does not equal your self-worth, and becoming an expert in one thing several times. There's a lesson in that as well. So John, go ahead, and you have some slides prepared here, which is great. Help us follow along, but go ahead and kick it off. So,
all right. Thank you. So, I don't usually start a conversation with, "Hey guys, I just lost $77 million." Like
Yeah.
it's not a conversation starter. Most people just drop their jaw and kind of in shock of how does that happen.
Sure.
So my story, I'm going to go through a little bit of a process, and Matt, jump in if you got questions. I'm all
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
back and forth banter. All right, so this is my building. I'm going to start with this, but I'm going to kind of just give you an agenda, an overall agenda. We're going to talk about my first house, my second house, my humble beginnings. I was a shoe salesman. Compassionate capitalism, that's kind of what I'm known for. Fix and flip, be your own bank, 13-story debacle, 12 years in hell, market forces, and investment thesis. Okay.
Great.
So we'll just kind of just go through this process. So I'm a big believer in origin story, right? The fruits produce the roots produce the fruits, right? So my roots were pretty good. I bought my first house, like you said, when I was 19 years old. I ended up in a car wreck and got a $20,000 insurance settlement. And for a 19-year-old, I had really no business buying a house, but that's what my mom said to do. We lost our home when I was 16 to foreclosure. This is in the mid 80s when interest rates were a bazillion percent, 18, 17, 15%. And so by the time I was 30, in my early 30s, I was living fairly well. I had a floating home on the Columbia River. It was pretty epic. I went swimming.
That's amazing. Yeah, I thought when I first saw that picture, I thought you were going to tell us a story about a home being flooded, but that's actually a floating home.
That is a floating home. We had something close to 1,800 square feet, 58 windows, if you can imagine it.
Wow.
I went swimming or sailing or jet skiing pretty much every single day. I was very, very active. I had a decent 401k. Everything was going well. My ex-wife had a really good job at Home Depot. So we were heavily vested in Home Depot when it was selling at $30 a share. Yeah, we were doing okay. And then I got diagnosed with a golf ball sized brain tumor. It was 93% fatality expectation, get your life in order kind of thing, surgery, the whole 9 yards. And
how did that diagnosis come about? Did you start feeling symptoms or illnesses, or was it routine checkup? I'm just curious how you kind of come across that.
I was a hyperactive person, right? I mean, very athletic, very energetic, did a lot of stuff. And I started just getting headaches on a routine and regular basis. And they would last for a couple of days, right? Nauseous, the whole 9 yards. And I mean, at first it was not a big deal. Nobody really thinks a 31-year-old's going to have a brain tumor. But they ran some tests, and lo and behold, this is actually an image of me. Sorry, it didn't work, but yeah, that's actually me.
Wow.
Around the posterior carotid artery. Basically, if you've got your carotid artery and it splits into 4 veins, and it basically just entwined about that. Yeah, it was a pretty crappy moment in my life.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't want to dwell here, right? There's a lot to go through. I realized something. I realized that there was a way to help people who are in foreclosure actually stay in their house, right? My very first real estate transaction, I made about $25,000, and it was a foreclosure, right? And this is what this is my house. This is actually the math on my house. $15,000 in arrears, 150,000 to pay off the mortgage. The value is 225, right?
Mhm.
What I developed, and this is really, I don't know anyone else in the country that's doing this, is I created a compassionate capitalism ideal that would help people stay in the house. These are the 4 pillars: stay in the house, retain most of their equity, rebuild their financial stability, and lower their monthly payments.
Mm.
Right? That's pretty amazing. You know, when you
Yeah.
think about, like, somebody calls up and you got 5 days before it goes to the auction, I have a solution to stop that.
Sure.
This is kind of what I did. And so I'm sharing, we take this $50,000 of equity, split it 50-50, the investor gets half, the foreclosed owner gets half. But we also let that person get the appreciation over the next 2 years. They're renting from us, right? We buy the house, we pay off the debt, we
Mhm.
go through the entire process of ownership, and we sign a contract. Mr. and Mrs. foreclosed owner will let you buy the house back at 195. Your
Mm.
future value is 248. We
Right.
walked in with a $30,000 profit. We don't need to make more, right? We're in this scenario, they started out with 60,000 of equity. Between rent subsidy, future equity, and their save, they're actually coming out ahead in this scenario, $7,000.
Wow.
And they get to stay in the house and
Yeah.
they get to rebuild their lives. That's pretty
That's
good.
incredible. So
Yeah.
you were actively identifying homes that were about to go through foreclosure, I imagine through connections with your banks, or what
Yeah.
was the process of finding them?
Well, back then, right, this is 2001 through 2005, it was just a simple notice of default list, right?
Mm.
You can go to any title company and get an NOD list. Yeah.
And you were doing that just locally, or were you doing it kind of nationwide, or were there specific areas that you focused in on?
I did it for about 4 years, 56 million in total portfolio, about
Wow.
250, 300 homes.
Mhm.
Yeah, this was me and a base of investors. I had 2 or 3 dozen investors helping me do all this.
Mhm.
So I owe quite a bit of gratitude to those people. But these are the 4 pillars: stay in the house, retain most of the equity, rebuild financial security, and lower the monthly payments. And for this, I was featured New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNBC,
Wow.
Marketplace Money, NPR. It was a thing in the Northwest. This is, I mean, hundreds of families were able to keep their house through that really tumultuous early 2000s.
Wow. So
Yeah,
$56 million home value, over a couple hundred homes, you said, or over 100 homes.
about
And
250, 300.
wow. So that's many lives that were impacted by this. That's amazing.
Well,
And
and this,
did you get to speak to folks, and like, I imagine part of this, like you said, it's compassionate, right? So part of this is kind of a feel good. So do you get to know some of the families and some of the stories and some of the kind of goodwill coming out of this?
yeah, we were able to, I have one client, I call them clients, they're never tenants. I hate the landlord tenant
Hmm.
nomenclature. They were clients. And I mean, one couple had 2 kids. She was, this is a tragic story, but this is what happens in foreclosure. She ended up getting really sick. She ended up an in utero miscarriage.
Oh,
And
geez.
they were just, the 2 of them, husband and wife, were beset with grief.
Hmm.
And I mean, she physically couldn't work. They mentally couldn't work. And they just kind of lost track of their finances. And a couple years later, they're back, everything's working fine, they got their house. I mean, it's everybody. So because I went through foreclosure as a teenager, and then as a young adult, 32, 33 years old, I've seen what foreclosure does to people. It just rips families apart.
Yeah.
My parents didn't survive their foreclosure. My marriage didn't survive my foreclosure.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to find a different way. And
Wow.
so I became a subject matter expert in this whole foreclosure system, and trying to help other people.
It's amazing. So
Yeah.
how did you get the confidence to kind of like accelerate? It seems like a lot of transactions, a lot of deals, or I guess a lot of like foreclosure deals, you said up to 300 over, I think it's 4 year time period.
Close to 5, but yeah, yep, closer to 5 years.
Got it. So like how did it accelerate? Were you kind of like testing it out at first, and was the first, couple months a little bit slower? Or like how did it accelerate to that volume? Because that seems like a lot of volume, and I don't know what type of team you had with you. So maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, I mean, back then you had to do everything by hand, right? You couldn't hire somebody to lick envelopes and put stamps on them. You had to have
Okay.
that person physically in. So we had a staff of 6 by the time it grew to 2005. I mean, by 2005, the economy was getting better. Everything was kind of just picking up, and foreclosures weren't really a thing. But 2001 through 2003, it was fast and heavy. There was 7%, 1 out of 20 houses in America were in default back then.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean but yeah, I mean, I just built a scene. It was all about, I had probably, let's say, 36 different investors that I worked with. And yeah, they'd put up the cash to stop the auction, and we'd go get a new loan and do the paperwork.
Great.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I liked it a lot. Where I'm going with this, and remember, I started with this conversation of I lost $77 million. So I'm trying to show you how I created that in the first place.
Sure.
And so I went through a pretty nasty divorce, 2004, 2005. I guess it wasn't nasty by most standards, but it was uncomfortable. I still have a lot of good things to say about my ex. But anyway, in that time, that's why I know it specifically is $56 million, because I had to tally everything up for the divorce courts. So the economy was shifting, everything was getting back to quote unquote normal. And so I took all of my profits from here in Portland, and I went to South Carolina and North Carolina. And there you could buy a house for 25 grand. And so I created this portfolio of, call it 400 fix and flips that, like, this was the math, right? We'd buy a house for 25 grand, we'd rehab it for 15, we have 40 in basis, and we're retailing it for 75. Ultimately, I like carrying the mortgage. I'm a big fan of second mortgages. So back then, the interest rates, we were getting about 8.25 on our seconds. And 263 doesn't sound like much, but in 7 years, you're almost doubling your profit. And so we'd make a $56,000 or $54,000 profit with 0 cost basis and long-term capital gains.
Wow.
This was just a money machine. And it's
And
because
what drew you to that area? I guess there's plenty of areas in the country that are cheap real estate. What drew you to that at that time, to the Carolinas?
the price, I mean, 25 grand was just kind of a, you couldn't miss on a $25,000 house.
Right.
And there were literally whole neighborhoods at this 20, 30, $15,000 price tag.
Right.
And it didn't take, I will go to my grave saying I will never invest in South Carolina again. Just so
I'm
there's
curious to hear why. Is that just because you've been there and so much, and you've had? I'm just curious why that is, because many do, right? Not, or I guess it had been a popular haven the last, maybe if you look back 5 to 7 years ago, it still had a lot of juice to go. Now it's probably that juice may have been nearly
no,
fully squeezed, but there's plenty
no,
to go. There's still some cheap real estate there, still some high end real estate now as well.
yeah, there's some great pockets. North Carolina, Spartanburg was where I had my,
Yeah.
in fact, that's where the building was that you saw earlier.
Mhm.
Spartanburg and Greenville, South Carolina, they were amazing. And they're still really good markets because
Yeah.
they're great places to live. I don't like the overt racism in South Carolina. Like, it's very obvious. And
Mm.
I'm from a mixed family, so that stands out to me.
Big turn off. Okay. So it's more of a cultural dislike for the area
Yeah,
after a
I
while.
mean, and I mean, I know one of my close friends is from Greenville, right? He's amazing, but
Mhm.
in general, there's a lot of overt racism there, and so I tend to stay away from South Carolina. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time. I was young. I was all of this, mind you, all of this happened before I was 40 years old, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's my building. That's 275 South Church Street. Um, yeah, I was 39 or 40 when all of this stuff happened. And we were in great shape, right?
Yeah.
The normal mortgages of the day were 100, 105% LTV. And
Oh my gosh. Right.
yeah, it was a heyday. You could do nothing wrong in the real estate world.
Yeah.
Like, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage.
Wow.
And my problem is I got financed by Lehman Brothers, right?
So
And
this building, so you did all those, the rehab, fix and flips, and you parlayed a lot of those profits now to kind of size up, scale up to this larger building you're showing here on screen.
correct. Yep. So I did all the foreclosure bailouts, and that, I mean, it, and like I said, become an expert in one thing several different times, right?
Yeah.
As the market shifts, become an expert in something new.
Mhm.
I was always very careful to watch the market. And it led me to this. I was able to take the profits from all of my previous businesses and put them into this. And then we bought the building in 08, March of 08, and we did the kind of renovation stuff that we could with tenants in, but eventually tenants had to leave. We started, I got the roof redone, everything was going great. And then the loan was 3.3 with a $6 million renovation budget. And we got one payment from Lehman, and that was it. There was no more. And we had this 13-story building with no tenants, an $80,000 a month mortgage, and no ability to pay it.
So that
Like,
all, that sounds like it all happened very fast. Is you got this new building, you got this business plan for the building, you're ready to go. You have your plan ready to get ready to execute, and all of a sudden, right, the kind of Lehman pulls their funding out, and all of a sudden you have an inability to execute your plan, right? And I guess
yeah,
on top of that, you have,
Lehman closed. They didn't just pull out the funding out. They closed. There was nobody standing in Lehman's place to continue with our business model. Like, they just closed. And I mean, the whole thing went into receivership within 45 days.
Wow.
They just called they just wanted as much cash as they could, and they were going to take it from anyone. And I mean, when tenants would pay the rent, it would go into a bank account controlled by Lehman. So like there was no way we could survive that.
Wow.
My business partner who lived in the building literally sent me, he and his wife sent me an email in the middle of the night saying, "Hi, we quit, bye." And I've literally never heard from them since.
Oh my gosh.
Just
Don't know if they left. Don't know if they just stopped paying and stayed. You have no idea.
no idea. Not another message from them in 15 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it's, and one of the main drivers of doing these podcasts is that I hope they hear me.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? Oh my gosh. So I mean, you got it sound like it's like, what was the time again? You said it was 2008. What was the month that you closed
So
on this
this was
property?
March of 08.
March of 08, yeah, I see on the bottom there. So
And
March of 08, by September, all hell had let loose. Had it started earlier for you, or was it kind of
no, I was
all started at the
actually
same time?
doing fairly well, even into the late part of, like, I didn't know things were really going to blow up in my world until November or December.
Okay.
Yeah, everything was still operationally working. We had money in the account. I mean, I was freaking out, but I thought we were solving problems, not creating new ones. And
Mhm.
and then I went to hell. I spent 12 years in this screaming panic. I mean, sobbing. There's no other way to illustrate it. I got a PhD in Netflix and Hulu.
Yeah.
That was the one.
Just to take your mind off the reality of the situation, I suppose.
Yep. I spent 15 hours a day watching Netflix, like, for 12 years. I
Wow.
tried other businesses. I tried really hard to start some other businesses, but for the most part, I was mentally incapable of working. I mean, you see the old films of people jumping off high rises in the 1920s when they get financially wiped out. Well,
Hmm.
that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
I the fear, the anguish, the frustration is very real.
Yeah.
So I stood at the top of this building half a dozen times, right?
Wow.
Just like I can tell you specifically, it's 119 feet to the ground.
Yeah.
Like,
Jeez.
I will joke
Dark
about.
times, dark
Oh,
times for sure. I mean, it's not, I know now you can talk about it. I'm sure it was anything but during that time. So
yeah.
what was I guess, what were the steps? I guess it was, I mean, you go through like the grief steps, I imagine. So like you're almost in denial that it's happening at first, and then it is happening, and you're like, well, what do I do? And what were some of the early steps? I guess you couldn't do anything, right? I guess you came to
Yeah.
realize, it sounds like, but
There were no early steps for me. I basically twiddled my thumbs for the better part of a decade. I was incoherent half the time. I
yeah.
was just numb. I couldn't before September 08, or I'm sorry, before March of 08, we were making $1 million a month,
Oh my
like
gosh.
just rolling in cash. And every dollar we got, we went and bought more properties. It was just a machine, and it
Yeah.
was working, and it was good. And we were employing people, and we were making whole neighborhoods better.
Yeah.
And then it just stopped. I
Wow.
mean, to be, and I had, oh my God, Matt, seriously, my ego during this whole thing was crazy. I had a pretty solid ego back then.
Sure. I mean,
But
everything you did worked
yeah,
better than you could ever imagine. I'm sure at the time it sounded like the
yeah,
fix and flip business, the foreclosure business, both creative businesses too, right? So that I'm sure, like, right, that not many people were maybe fix and flip, but the sounds like the bankruptcy, sorry, the foreclosure deal, that was very creative. So
yeah.
um,
I yeah, it was tough. It was very, very tough. So I always want to put this in here, but you got to get mental health. Mental health, especially for entrepreneurs, we deal with such highs and lows all the time.
mhm,
And we don't really talk about it as a community. No one talks about, hey, I just lost my portfolio and now I'm going to go kill myself.
yeah,
And I'm not trying to bring triggers up, but I am trying to bring out the message that A, real estate is risky. B, even our best models can blow up and not on our own accord.
right,
Like I would tell you, I will go to my grave. I had a good business, like very good fundamentals.
mhm.
Uh, and still blew up. But anyway,
I mean, not to, I mean, it's essentially your the fatal flaw is the lender that you had, right? Which I'm sure at the time you didn't put
yeah,
much thought into. Whoever gave you the loan and it kind of had the best terms, right? That's the way
yeah,
many folks think about it today. To be quite honest, before this story today, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into who the lender is and what their financial
yeah.
situation is, to be quite honest.
So this brings me to this slide. I'm gonna skip one. Um, Categorically, as long as the bank controls the asset, they control the fate of everyone connected to that asset.
Mhm.
Let that just sink in for a minute. You and I, we are business owners. We buy real estate. We think mentally we are the owner of this asset. But the reality is that that bank controls every aspect of it as long as they have one nickel debt owed.
Mhm.
I've
You're
seen
right.
people go to foreclosure over a dime, literally a dime discrepancy, and they go to default.
Oh my gosh.
I have literally seen it.
Yeah.
And nobody really gets how much control. There's a reason these banks have 40 stories in every city in America.
Right.
Uh, yeah, they control the fate of everybody, and it scares the hell out of me, honestly.
Sure.
Um, so, yep, lots of lessons. Now, and I want to be mindful of time. Are we okay? I've got a little bit more to go. You want me to?
Yeah, let's fast forward a little bit. We'll try to keep it to, I think we started 10 minutes late, so we have maybe 15 minutes or so.
Gotcha. All right. So the big issue is there's a pending wall. Right now, the US economy has about 20, almost $21 trillion of commercial real estate. Start with that number.
Mhm.
We're at 1.5 trillion that are predicted to go bad,
Wow. Jeez.
right?
I've seen that specific headline, others similar to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a month ago. In '08, we had the red line are the banks that failed. So '08, '09, 140 banks, total
Mhm.
assets, 373 billion. The three banks that failed are 50% bigger than all of '08, with
Wow.
almost 600 billion in assets. When this gets worse, and it likely will, this is going to be a break the bank moment. So I am watching, everybody on the planet should be watching this number.
Yeah.
Um, this is what is currently in default in America right now. $700 billion worth of properties in default today.
Wow.
And that's primarily large commercial large office, and some retail.
Yep.
Yep. That's so this is how I'm rebuilding. So I had 15 years to think about what to do and how to do it. And this is what I fondly refer to as the 5 laws of leverage. These are your lever points, right? What I try to tell people, I'm rebuilding my financial life, and I know that other people are going to do the same. You get the most leverage on the furthest out on the fulcrum, and that is communication. And then technology, people, money, time. Most people try to lever time and money, right? Especially new entrepreneurs. They make a lot of mistakes. They throw a bunch of time and they throw a bunch of money. And it's mostly see if spaghetti hits against the wall. And I'm here to tell you, after building a half dozen successful businesses, start with the communication piece first. Figure out how to leverage both internal and external communication. Then you master the technology. Then you start levering people, and then you can throw money and time at the problem.
Sure.
But this is my formula for rebuilding my life.
I like it. It's good framework.
Thank you. This is actually my original. I hate my graphics. Sorry, guys. I'm not a graphics guy, but this is my original IP, if you will.
Artwork, yes.
Yeah. So this is my investment thesis. I think everybody should have a core investment thesis. Mine is, you'll notice a trend. I like my big buildings.
Yeah.
So I'm doing condo conversions, right? I do not want to be a landlord anymore. I like mortgage notes, and I like to double my money in 2 years. Those are kind of my primary goals in the real estate world. Condo conversions just kind of fit that perfectly. This is that self-worth check. It's always this fine line of know what you're worth, but your self-worth is not your net worth. But then there's, it ain't bragging if it's true. Like I asked my pastor one time, like, how do I know when it just sounds like I'm bragging? And he's like, it ain't bragging if it's true. You asked me about my hours, right? Specifically, this is when I got sick. In this period, I started my real estate world, and I made about $4,000 an hour.
Sorry, so what's on the left? Is that your age? The first column is your age? Is that what that is?
First column is
the year, and then the next one.
That's the number of hours I'm working per year or per week.
Okay.
Times number of weeks in a month. I started late in September, October of 2001. So I only worked a little bit because I was still sick. And I was still getting better in early 2002. But these are my total sum hours, 19,000 hours working to build a portfolio of 77 million. So I figure my hourly wage was about $4,000 an hour.
Wow.
In one transaction this year, I'm going to do $25,000 an hour.
That's it. Scale, right?
Scale. It really is about the 5 laws of leverage.
Yeah.
Right? If you can master this piece of it, this piece is easy.
So tell us about what is that project? It is the condo conversion project, or is there multiple? You said there's one.
Yeah, just one. I only have to do one.
At that rate, yes.
Yeah, it's 10 stories. It's 110,000 square feet. It's got a view. It's literally got that for a view. Like,
wow.
I'm not making it up. That's a real, that's Mount Rainier, and you can see it just as clear from all, from the third, from this, let's see, 1, 2, 3. From the third story up, you have this view.
That's incredible.
And you have a rooftop bar. Yeah, I like condo conversions because they're straightforward. They're going back to this premise, right? This part where all of these properties are going into default. You can
Mhm.
get these really beautiful buildings at super discount prices. Sorry. I went a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, so
So
that's,
what was this an office building prior, or was it a sorry, I see a multifamily. Was it
yeah,
a multifamily?
10-story office building.
Oh, it was an office building. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Love it. Love
It's
it.
literally been vacant for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Uh,
they have virtually no bargaining power.
Yeah. Well, the situation will only get worse for offices, it seems. So, so
Yep,
you're right.
you're not gonna, I mean, he does have plans. We do have plans to build it, to convert it into apartments, but I personally think that I know he's got a much bigger project. He got $125 million project that he started 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And so this is just dead weight to him.
Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
yeah,
That's good. It's a good. How'd you source it? Or I guess how long did it take you to source it? And like, what was that process for that?
about 9 months I've been looking. I coincidentally, my brother lives in Tacoma, so I always look at Tacoma to see if there's anything cool up there.
Mhm.
And I just found it on, I found it on a wholesaler site. It's not listed on Crexy. It's not listed in LoopNet. It's not like, it was hard to get to this.
Wow.
I was really surprised at the lack of marketing.
For something that's been sitting for 3 years, nonetheless, right? So you
Yeah,
would think.
I was really astounded. If you go to Crexy, if you go to LoopNet, you won't find this deal.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just a kind of, I'm always looking. I literally get 30 emails a day from various different sources for good.
Brokers and everything. Yeah.
So
What's like the execution, what's the execution complexity to doing a condo conversion? I imagine it's much easier here where it's vacant already. So you kind of build it, right? You build it and then you sell it, I imagine. But I know in Northeast here, for example, I lived in a building where it was all rentals, and someone tried to come in and convert to condos. I think a certain percent of the building had to agree, or they had to have a certain percent of the building kind of go condo until they can kind of flip it or make it permanent or something like that. I forget what the exact
there's
stipulation was
definitely,
there.
each state has its own process. I'm very acquainted with the West Coast.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know the parameters on the East, but I assume they're pretty similar. It's actually, I think condo conversions are wildly they're not talked about enough.
Mm.
Uh, because if a multifamily doesn't pencil in, but it's still in a good area, that maybe the rents won't comp to the values you need. But if you get like Seattle, for example, if you've got a $250,000 per door unit, it's likely that that would convert to a condo with relative ease, because housing prices in Seattle or any of the large metro areas, it'll probably work out to be able to convert to a condo.
Right.
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 I mean, this property, the condos within a half a mile that have been converted are $508 per square foot,
Wow.
which makes this a 55 or $60 million building.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's just, it's just a little bit of work.
I was
And,
say, do
and I think
you
we'll get
partner
higher.
with a developer, or I
What's
guess that
that?
had to be how do you have a background in developing, or did you partner with a developer,
Well, I
or
have half a background.
I'm sure it's
We were in the middle of this condo conversion in South Carolina when all things fell apart.
right.
So I do have some expertise. I sadly have not completed a project, which is why I'm hell bent on getting this one done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I really, I'm certain, one of my big kind of investment thesis pieces is I'm a big advocate of paths to homeownership.
Hmm.
Where I live, I'm in Vancouver, the properties, a young family can, I bought my first house at 19 on a single person's income. That story doesn't exist anymore. No one
Right.
can do that in any metropolitan area.
You're right. It's very difficult to uh, even a high income earner. It's still difficult to buy in commutable areas and desirable neighborhoods with the schools that folks might want and all that. It's very competitive, right? It's a difficult path.
Uh, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm definitely enjoying this. I love talking to people and teaching them. I've done some interesting things in my career.
Yes, you
And
have. I can confirm that. Just
yeah.
speaking to you today.
I
You
try to
have.
find the niche that nobody else is in.
Yeah.
I'm really good at finding I don't ever want to be in multifamily again, right? There's just that space is flooded. You said, where are you? You said Phoenix, do I remember? Where'd you say you were? Oh, you said
Where,
Northeast. You said New
I
Jersey.
live in New Jersey. Yeah, I actually do have as you're about to say, I do have multifamily investments. Some of them are exiting, and actually we're considering other asset class. So we should talk further, and I'd love to hear your investment thesis and thoughts further on that.
Nice.
But
Yeah, I think that most properties, if they won't cash flow if they're in, there's a couple of specific things you're looking for in condo conversions. You're looking for uniformity.
mhm,
These properties with 5 or 6 different bedroom models, they don't really work, right? You
right,
want cookie cutter. I'm the condo president of our condo association, right? I've been in this condo world for 20 years. There are some things work and some things don't, but uniformity is really important.
yeah,
Yeah, if you're exiting, I'm happy to take a look at something.
yeah.
Um,
We should talk.
but
Excellent. Well, this was a really good session and really informative. Appreciate you taking the time and sharing stories. I'm sure are still not easy to share. Reflecting back on those, it's funny. You mentioned Lehman Brothers. I actually started my career at Barclays, who ended up
oh,
purchasing Lehman, and
yeah,
my professional career started in 2008. So I was
wow,
kind of had a different view of it all. Kind of, I was joining a small European bank in the U.S.
yeah,
and they doubled, at least people size doubled nearly
yeah,
overnight. I started in August, and this all kind of happened in September. So
wow, wow,
um,
that's crazy. Yeah, it was a weird moment. Um,
yeah,
the I think we're going into it again. It's not on the consumer side. The consumer, for the most part, like 85% of the mortgages in the consumer realm are really safe. 30-year fixed,
mhm,
5% or better. That's the
yeah,
vast majority. So single family res is safe this time. It's the big multifamily, it's the big uh office that's
yeah,
in real trouble.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's scary times. It's uncertain times for sure. So, like you said, there are signs already coming. So,
This is, I think, honestly, yes, it's scary for people who are not informed. I think this is the best time to be in real estate. like right
Sure,
now.
right. Well, the volatile times create opportunity, right? So that's you're right. That's the way it
There's
is.
a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, and right now, if you're clever and careful, you can make an awful lot of money. I really do plan to 2x every year. I'll double my money every 2 years.
That's incredible. That's incredible returns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening, and appreciate the lessons learned. And for anyone that wants to reach out, perhaps you could share screen one more time with your contact page there. And we'll
Oh,
just kind of flash that.
sure. I could say it here. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
I can.
Sure.
John at Green Cottage Homes. I actually have 2 email addresses, John at Green Cottage Homes, or John, and this is me really, John at ratracerescue.net. Like, I'm super cheesy, John at
Love it.
ratracerescue.net. Yeah, and there's a podcast for that too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's where folks can find you if they want to learn more. I hope everyone's it looks like everyone is enjoying their holiday week. So for those of you that watch it on replay, hope you guys pulled a lot of interesting nuggets out of this. If you want to learn more, that's where you can reach John. John, thank you again. And you and I will be speaking soon. I'll reach out to you. So
Yeah,
a lot more to learn. Thank you very much. And
my pleasure. My pleasure. Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll speak
Bye,
soon.
guys.
Thanks, John. Take care.